right, hi everybody. Today is going to be all about literary genres. So what is a literary genre? A genre is a particular style or type of writing. So when you are at the library, you should be able to tell the librarian or your teacher what your favorite genre is. Because if you can do that, you'll be able to find more books that you enjoy. Also, when you are reading a book of a particular genre, you should be able to know the typical characteristics. So if you pick up, for example, a fantasy novel, you should know what that means so that when you read it, it's not going to be a surprise to you when the animals start talking. So right here we have a list of some of the most common genres. We're going to get into the details in just a second, but this way you kind of get that introduction. Fiction includes fables, folktales, and fairy tales. Fantasy, mystery, myth, legend, historical fiction, realistic fiction, and science fiction. Nonfiction includes biography, autobiography, reference, essays, newspaper articles, speeches, diaries, letters, and other informational texts. So if you're wondering how do you tell the difference, which is true and which is untrue, when I was a kid, I remember that non meant not. So if it's nonfiction, that means it's not fiction. Okay, well, how in the heck do you remember what fiction means? F, just remember, fiction starts with F, and F also starts the words fake and false. So if it's fiction, that means that the author made it up. It's fake. If it's not fiction, it's not fake or false. So it's true. It's a really easy way to remember. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into some of these, and that way we can really go into each one of those and remember what they're about. Fiction is writing that tells about imaginary people and events. They are made up. So, see, like Superman, Three Little Pigs. Obviously, that's not real, but that doesn't mean you can't learn amazing things from fiction. First, let's talk about fantasy. As many of you know, this is Miss Oyola's personal favorite. In this type of story, the author has created a magical world where anything is possible. Fantasy may include magical beings, talking animals, or other impossibilities. Yes, Lord of the Rings, obviously. Definitely one of the classic examples from cinema recently is the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and of course the books that precede them. The books were first. If you like the movies, read the books. Historical fiction is another one of my favorites because you can learn stuff while you're reading a story that's made up. These are stories with fictional characters and events in a historical setting. So it's about a real place, a real time, a real problem in history, but the people that are set in that setting are made up. The story takes the reader back to a particular time period where they learn about the everyday life of a person. The characters may interact with actual historical characters, but usually the main character is not based on a real person. Usually. That's why it's fiction. Here we go. Science fiction. Stories based on real or imagined inventions, space travel, or life in other worlds, usually set in the future. It often explores the unknown. So another way to think about sci-fi is if it involves a lot of technology that is completely outside the realm of reality. If it takes place in the future, and if there's spaceships in it, you can pretty much figure out it being sci-fi. And you guys know how much I love Star Wars. I do have a Darth Vader poster in my room after all. Star Wars is an example of technology. Now, if you're a huge dork like me, you know that Star Wars actually technically takes place in the past, but since it involves space and space travel and spaceships and aliens, it is technically sci-fi. Sorry, nerds out there who want to say that it's fantasy. All right. Horror and mystery, definitely a student favorite. Many of you guys love horror. Horror is fiction in which events evoke a feeling of fright in both the characters and the reader. So that's about the emotion that is created, right? What do you feel when you're reading it? You should feel scared. Mystery is fiction dealing with a solution of a crime or the unraveling of secrets. So there have been some amazing young adult mystery stories where teenagers are trying to solve the mystery. Like I think that book was called like 39 Clues or something was one of them, but there's a couple in our library. You can check it out. All right, this is another favorite a lot of students, realistic fiction. So stories that could actually happen in real life. The setting is realistic, so it's not taking place on another planet. It's not about some kind of, crazy magical school or anything like that. This could very well be a real life story. This could be something that actually happened, but it's just that it's made up. The characters speak and act like real people. The story describes real life problems and events. Fables. These are very, very old stories. A short story, usually with animal characters, that teaches a lesson about what is important in life. So you learn something about life. There is a very obvious theme. We call those themes. There's a very obvious theme in the story that you're supposed to learn from. Folk tales are generally told generation to generation, usually by word of mouth. That means these are very, very old stories. They've been told for a very long time. Sometimes different versions in different cultures. The original storyteller is unknown because these stories have been around so long. Nobody even knows who came up with the story anymore. Sometimes they involve animals or wishes or magic or trickery. Sometimes the number 3. These examples over here are all from different wonderful cultures. So, every culture has its folk tales. Try to think about the stories that you heard when you were a little kid. Myths. Lots of people love the Greek myths. There are many, many other types of mythologies. So myths are early people's way to explain the universe. Many gods and goddesses are present in myths. The goddesses, and heroes are superhuman in nature. Human emotions are experienced by the gods. Magic is often present in myths. Gods sometimes appear in disguised form. So these are some pretty wild, crazy stories that people came up with back in the day to explain the way the world worked. But remember that they actually believed a lot of this stuff, which is always fun to think about. Legend, a story handed down from the past that people tell as a true story, but sometimes the details are difficult to confirm. So kind of similar to a folktale. If you get folktale, fable, and legend mixed up, do not worry. Most people do, and that's okay. And sometimes you can call something it's kind of a folktale and a legend. That happens, and that's okay. You just need to try to figure out which one's the best fit. Back to the bullets. The person telling the story usually does not claim to be an eyewitness to the events, but heard it from someone who knows someone who heard it from someone who was really there. Legends often contain a moral or a lesson and are told to uphold the values of a community. They often involve supernatural or religious elements. Tall tale, again, very, very similar to fable, folktale, and legend. But the tall tales, if it's a tall tale, it's going to have the 3 E's: extraordinary person, exaggeration, and explanation. Extraordinary person, the main character is better at things than an ordinary person. Exaggeration, makes something greater or bigger than it really could be. Explanation, explains how something came to be. So this one right here is Paul Bunyan. Another one that's really common is John Henry and his story with taking on the locomotive and laying down the train tracks. Those are tall tales because it's an extraordinary person doing something that nobody else can do. Fairy tales. Fairy tales often begin with once upon a time or long, long ago. Includes a good character and a bad, evil character. Includes magic or something enchanted. Involves a problem that is solved, and the good people live happily ever after. Setting is often a forest or a castle. Now, nonfiction. Nonfiction is going to be way different from fiction. It's accounts of real people, places, and events. These are facts, not fiction. That's why it's called nonfiction, okay? And we already said those include biography, textbook, autobiography, instructional texts, informational texts, and reference books. Biography is a true story about a person's life or the parts of his or her life. It's written in third-person point of view with he or she. So another author wrote the story of someone else's life. That's different from an autobiography. Autobiographies are books that people write about their own life. It's written in first-person point of view. So I, me, my. So when you become famous someday, if you want to write your own life story, that would be an autobiography. Or you can hire somebody to write it for you. And as long as they're being objective about it, then it's a biography. Informational texts. They provide facts about a variety of topics like sports, animals, science, history, career, travel, geography, space, weather, whatever. So the For Dummies series is a great example of informational texts. This one looks like a world history textbook, a solar system book. All these different things are giving you information about a topic. Learn to play drums, something my son is trying to do. Those are all informational texts. So let's look at some other types of writing that don't fall into these. Poetry. Poetry is verse written to create a response of thought and feeling from the reader. It often uses rhyme and rhythm. Lines of poetry are written in stanzas. May include patterns of rhyme to capture the reader's interest. Uses carefully selected words and phrases to create vivid pictures in the reader's mind. Drama and plays. Has a cast of characters presented to an audience. May have a narrator who gives important information. Parts called acts or scenes. Has props to help support the action. And dialogue that tells what the actors say. Stage directions are in italics. All right, our very last slide. You need to name the genre of literature for each of these listed. So I describe a text, numbers 1 through 8. Get my face out of the way. It's going to be your job to go back through the slides and figure out how would you best categorize each one of these examples. Reach out if you have any questions. Bye-bye.